Okay. Happy Chanukah, University District Minyan Parsha class and Chanukah class. So Chaim. This week we have Shabbos Chanukah falls out on Parshat Miketz. Parshat Miketz, as we spoke many years before, it is a continuation of Hey Pinchas, Happy Chanukah, good to have Shabbos. Chaim.
Happy Hanukkah, Rabbi Mendy.
So
Hopefully the Wi-Fi won't buzz out on me like it did last week.
Bezrat Hashem. So we have this week is Parshas Miketz, Shabbos Chanukah, and Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, because Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos. We have the unique opportunity. It happens more often than I remember, but that we have the opportunity to take out 3 Sifrei Torah. If you're in a shul that has more than one Torah, more than 3, has up to 3 Torahs, we'll be taking out 3 Sifrei Torah this week Shabbos to read. The reading for Chanukah, the reading for Miketz, the reading for Rosh Chodesh, and the reading for Chanukah, and so it's a big deal to take out 3 Sefer Torah. We know the number 3 in Torah is a big deal because 3 times of something, the number 3 creates a chazaka, established fact, and so when you have the Shabbos that's still in the month of Kislev, which is the Chodesh HaGeula, the month of redemption. And it's not only that, it's the 30th of the month of redemption. Mamash, a completion, a complete month. And we go into Rosh Chodesh Teves. And like we learned in the class last week that Teves is a month which is guf nena min guf, which is the idea that of achdus, of unity, that people take warmth and chizuk from each other, obviously in an appropriate way. Take chizuk from each other. Hey, Jeremy, take chizuk from each other, and it's to a month where we have an opportunity to transform the gashmis of the world, physicality, and to bring from the month of Kislev, which is the month of or of light, and bring it into the mundane. And the reason why the month of Kislev is called the month of light is not just because Chanukah is the holiday of lights, which is Or, but also because starting from the beginning of the month, we have Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which is the month in Chabad where we celebrate the recovery of the Rebbe, and we know that the Chassidus, which is led by our Rebbe, is to give us the ability to connect to the Or, to the light, and to bring the light, to bring Gilui, revelations into the world. And that continues with the 10th and 9th of Kislev, which is the Yortzeit and the birthday and the liberation of the Mittel Rebbe, like we verbringed. And then we have the 14th of Kislev, which the Rebbe says is the Rebbe's anniversary, which the Rebbe tells us is the day that connects us to him, which is a further empowering moment of awe, of light. And then, of course, we have the Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus, Yutes, the 19th and 20th of Kislev, which we celebrate Chassidus and Sefer Tanya, and it's the new year for our ability to connect to the source of light, and to bring light into the world, and so it's and then we have Chanukah, which is the holiday of lights. So the idea basically is that this is a month that if you were able to see the months from above, this would be the month that's full of full of light. And it's a light that lights up the darkness. And really, this is what Parshas Miketz starts with. Parshas Miketz is an interesting parsha, because Miketz means at the end of 2 years. Imagine a parsha starts at the end of 2 years. We have no parsha that starts at the end of 2 years or at the end of something. Like something's been finished. There was a need for whatever reason that for Yaakov, his children, and specifically Yosef, that he went through very difficult times for not a short amount of time. He was taken from his father. His brother sold him to the slave owners that eventually sold him to Egypt. and they to the through the different various caravans that were peddling anything, even peddling lives, right? Who buys a person? Someone comes in and they're saying we want to sell our brother for a few ruble, right? A few shekel. They'll buy anything. The Ishmaelim, the Madanim, whatever is for sale, they try. It says, Dr. Susan, they say traditionally they carry oils and zephyrs and other things. And for Yosef's sake, God said that this time they're not going to carry bad smelling materials. They're going to carry pleasant things. But basically, they're just peddlers. They're selling whatever comes available. They'll sell fuel, and they'll sell foods, and they'll sell people, and they'll buy people. So Yosef was sold to human peddlers, people that were selling, that had no problem buying human life and selling it to someone else. And he was sold many times. He became a commodity. Yosef became a commodity. First, this person owned him, then they sold him to another person. The Torah tells us last week that Yosef was continuously being sold until eventually they made it to Egypt. And in Egypt, he was sold as a slave to Potiphar, Sarah Tabachim, right? And he's given from Potiphar. He's lucky in a certain way. He's lucky that he found a slave owner that treated him with respect up until a certain point, and recognized the success that Yosef brought with him, the Hatzlacha, that Yosef brought true success wherever he was. And the Sarah Tabachim, hello, Dr. Dershowitz, happy Chanukah. So he had Hatzlacha in his things that he was doing, and therefore the Sarah Tabachim, the butcher for Paro, was identified success, and it worked for him. Yosef took care of everything. And then Yosef has the falling out with the incident with the Potiphar's wife, where Potiphar it doesn't show that he's exactly willing, but however you say it, at the end of the day, he throws him into the bore, into the pit, back into the pit, like we said last week, and he becomes a prisoner, and he's there for a long time. Yosef was sold at 17 years old, and he becomes king. He becomes king in 30s. So he's 12 years in the situation, and most of those years he spent in prison. He spent in the bore, and so and like we said, the end of last week's parsha is Vayishkacheu. He's forgotten, and the Torah says Vayhi Miketz Chanukah. The parsha stops and says whatever it was, because there's a fundamental difference between the end of last week's parsha and the beginning of this week's parsha. Last week's parsha ends up with seemingly the lack of hope. I mean, when you place your hope, you place this hope in helping the wine pourer, the Sarat Mashkin, the wine pourer, who he interpreted his dreams positively, and it worked out, and he was reinstated as the wine pourer for Parai. And he said, "Remember me. I'm wrong. I'm wrongly accused. I don't belong here. I don't belong in Egypt. I'm wrongly accused. Help me out. I helped you. I was kind to you. I didn't have to be. So help me out." When he forgets him, he places his hope. We say, "Or Adam asher yiftach ba'Adam," right? Curses the man who believes in another man. And it says because Yosef Tzaddik was on such a level that he should have just in his level, although we have to do ishtadlus, although a person has to put effort in, like we spoke many times, where Yosef saw things were working supernaturally. It means things didn't make sense. So if it does make sense, just let it be, ride the wave. But Vayishkacheu, and so therefore seemingly the end of the parsha is a very negative, ends on a negative note. The negative note seemingly is that although, like we spoke last week, that it closes up the story and shows us and focuses and shines on the success of Yosef, his ability to be successful in the most difficult situation. The mamash, he was successful in the way that he made the best of the worst situations. Like the Rebbe points out, the success that he had in prison was even greater than the success he had in Potiphar's house. So that's something to celebrate on its own, where a person is able to take the difficult situation in life and turn it in not only to a survivor, but to success. And surviving and successful are not the same things. The success wasn't that he survived, but Imamish was matzliach, he was successful. But nevertheless, it's Vayishev. He's forgotten. He's left in the pit. So seemingly in the bigger picture, it's a negative, because a person should be free, especially he didn't do anything wrong. And comes Vayhi Miketz Chanukah Shana, comes this week's parsha and starts something amazing. It's over. Whatever that was, with its hatzlacha, with everything, it's over. Miketz Chanukah Shana, after 2 years, it's over, and starts something new. And right away, Pari has his dreams of the 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows and the 7 healthy fat bushels of wheat and the 7 dried out, skinny, unhealthy looking bushels of wheat, and the consumption of the bad of the good. But and it was so bad that even after consuming it, you couldn't even see that it was ever existed. There's no sign, the skinny cows eat fat cows. So you should be able to see that the skinny cows ate fat cows, especially if they're skinny, right? When something skinny consumes something so large like a fat cow, you would see at least an effect. It says you didn't even know that it consumed the fat cows. So the Paro has this confusing dream, and that leads Yosef to become out of the bar, and he becomes a viceroy. Now, so it's a total change. Miketz, it's over. Whatever it was, it's over. Whatever this was, whatever this purpose was, it's over for Yosef. It wasn't over yet for his father. It wasn't over yet for his brothers. Yosef first becomes king, and there's the first full 7 years of success. Only when the famine starts does Yosef start making his interactions with his brothers, which eventually leads to his reunification with his father, and his father coming down to Mitzrayim, and his father having the best years of his life. It's all started from Miketz. Whatever that was finished for Yosef, and starts the Yeshua. And again, in the full Yeshua, you have to remember something. The Rebbe asked the question, the obvious klotzkash. Why is it that Yaakov Avinu, Yosef doesn't, as soon as he becomes king, where he has a certain tremendous abilities of power, right? Maybe he couldn't have just ran away from Egypt. He kind of was still on contract, so to say. I'm sure Pari had the small writing in the contract saying that if you're going to refuse the job as king, you're going back to the pit. I'm sure there was something there. I mean, Yosef wasn't really free to just pack his bags and leave Egypt, because we know we know from the Parshat Vayeshev he has to kind of negotiate to even bury his father in Eretz Yisrael. He has to tell Pari that that I swore to my father just like I swore to you, and if you don't let me, Yosef had to negotiate. So I mean, why did he have to negotiate? Why couldn't he just notify Pari, I'm going to bury my father? Why did he have to ask Pari permission? And not only did he have to ask Pari permission, but had he not had leverage on Pari, it's possible Pari wouldn't have let him go. Rashi says, that as you swore, the only reason I'm letting you bury, because what happens was that when Yosef meets Paro, one of Paro's qualities that made him king was his knowledge. He wasn't an impressive person in his physique, as the Torah tells us about Paro, but he was a smart person. He made the best of his circumstances. He knew all the languages, which was a big deal those days. You have to remember, the languages weren't introduced not too many years before then. The Tower of Babylon. Until then, everyone spoke Lashon HaKodesh. I mean, literally, if you think about it, if there was a flood, and there's 4 males that survived the flood, Noach and his 3 sons, and from there, like the Torah says, the world is the creation. And even if you go further back, the first man, right? How do you have all these languages? 70 languages, Latin and Latin-based languages and other languages and Asian languages and Native American languages. I mean, where do these languages come from? They were all one mishpacha. Everyone spoke one language. Because we know that the Tower of Babylon, God created a new idea of languages. And that wasn't so many years before. Avraham Avinu was alive in the story of the Tower of Babylon. And Yitzchak and Yaakov lived in Avram's life. So, okay, fine. I mean, we're talking about, in those days, people lived longer. So we're talking about Paro. I mean, it's not like it's such a big deal. But each nation had their own language. And Pare stuck with it, and he learned, he knew all the languages. If you're early enough in the game, as the language are being introduced. So he went and studied all the languages. It doesn't say it was a miracle. He studied all the languages as they came out, maybe. So he knows all the languages. And that was one of his signs of qualifications to be king. And therefore, and Yosef, in order to impress Paro that he's a person also of quality, because you have to remember something. When a person, one of the things that could work psychologically could work, that what makes you special is something you want to protect yourself with. Right? That's what impresses kind of yourself as well. Right? So if it impresses yourself as well, so you have over here, Pari wants to make sure that he's the only person who knows all these languages. That's his unique thing. The funny thing is the only language he doesn't know is the language that he spoke before the 70 languages, which is the language of Lashon HaKodesh. And so what happens? Paro wants to take Yosef out quickly. Gavriel, who's obviously the angel Gavriel, we see from very last week's Parsha, is kind of the guardian angel of Yosef. That when Yosef meets he meets a person in the field on his way to his brothers, it's the angel Gabriel. This is Rashi tells us. So it's brought down that Gabriel comes back again and he teaches Yosef the 70 languages. So when he comes to Paro, he could play him at his own game. He could say, look, I also know the languages. And then he said, I know one more than you. I know Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue. And Paro made him swear, no one should know, because that was what kept him special. And if they would find out there's a language he doesn't know, so what's so special about Paro? So therefore, and he only allows Yosef to bury Yaakov, because Yaakov knows all this, because he has leverage on Paro. Otherwise, he says, I wouldn't let you go. So we see this, Yosef didn't have absolute freedom. He was kind of a slave. He was king and he ruled, and everything he said that the Paro says in this exposure, whatever Yosef says, do. He's in full control. But the Rakakise Agdal Mimecha, and he held that. He held the key to Yosef's future and to Yosef's presence. So but still, the Rebbe says, why wouldn't Yosef tell his father? He could send a messenger. He could send a post. He could send a telegram. He was at least 7 years king or viceroy before the sons of Yaakov come down. Why wouldn't he notify Yaakov of his that he's here? And the answer is given is because Yosef had to keep. There was a decree from Hashem. In the short answer is there was a decree from Hashem that Hashem says that Yaakov had to be punished for the 22 years he didn't respect his father. For 22 years Yaakov didn't show kibbutz, he didn't show respect because he lived in Lavan, even though he had a reason to live by his uncle. He was running away from his brother. But the end of the day is he didn't show kibbutz, he didn't respect his father, and he took his time to make it to Hebron, 18 months. So he was punished 22 years, where his favorite son, was taken from him. So Yosef couldn't notify his father. But so he had to keep this final 7 years also as part of Yaakov being in the dark and mourning, because he mourned him until he seen him. But the shift, the ground started to shake already in the beginning of this week's parsha. Yaakov didn't know it yet. The sons didn't know it yet. But their future was starting to change already. There were 7 silent years, so to say, that was already predestined to set the setting for the Jewish people to come down to Mitzrayim. Now, in the bigger picture, is this a positive thing? We don't know, because what happens from here? The Jewish people remain in Egypt for 210 years, and starts the first exile of the Jewish people, which there was no way out of it. God promised Avram in the Bris Ben Absarim that your children are going to be enslaved in a foreign nation. And only afterwards will they go out B'rechush Gadol with great and become a nation and get to receive the Torah and go back to Eretz Yisrael and build the Beis HaMikdash eventually and have the king from the family of Yehuda. But in this part of the story, and also because in the bigger picture, there's a unique thing about Golus, that only through Golus, through exile, do we really achieve the purpose of creation, of going out there and changing the world. But this definitely started a positive shift in this part of the story, where Yaakov and his family are saved. By Kalkul Yosef Esachav, we know that Yosef represented. He did tremendous work, not just in physical, but also in the spiritual, in doing most of the work that had to be done in Egypt. Most of what the Jewish people would have to do in Egypt was done by Yosef. First of all, he made all the people circumcise themselves. That was a big deal. It was a big deal. It's a discussion on its own. How could Yosef ask them to circumcise themselves? There's no obligation for the Egyptians to be circumcised. And the answer is because Yosef was such a force in Egypt under the allowance of Parai, that everyone had a din of Kinyan Kaspa. Right? Avram was told that all the people that belong to you, your servants, you have to circumcise. The people in Egypt were considered Yosef's servants. So therefore, they, just like a servant has to circumcise, so too the people of Egypt had to circumcise themselves. So Yosef did a tremendous amount of work that he went out there and he started to transform the darkness, which again is the message of Chanukah. The message of Chanukah in the month of Kislev that we're completing this week. And we're bringing out 3 Sefer Torahs to celebrate it. We're celebrating the new month, we're celebrating Chanukah, and we're celebrating the Shabbos Miketz, the end of that part of the story. And beginning to something new, beginning to that no longer is the Hatzlach of Yosef, that he's a person of success in the dungeons, or as a slave to the butcher. Yosef is success in a way of Archava. Kifrani Elikim, he has the son of Ephraim, where he names about his success in a way of a limited level of freedom, of abilities. The Rebbe always says that the last years of Golus, we're going to have the ability to have like the success of Yosef Atzadik. The Rebbe benched very much. The Rebbe spoke very much the last years about the Hatzlacha Begashmis, the success Begashmis in the physical and the material that we have, that we're going to have in the end of Golus. And if you think about it, whatever the reason is, however you want to understand it on our own, but the success, the Hatzlacha that Yosef had that the Jewish people have today in most of the world. I mean, we have a lot of issues that we're dealing with, and there's a lot of pain and anti-Semitism, and we all know the stories of what happened this week. Hashem yinkam damam of people who dedicated their life to helping others and bringing the light were gunned down in cold blood. And so, of course, we're definitely in Golus. There's no even question. We're in Golus. We're in exile. But in the exile, there's many ways of the exile, right? Yosef was also in exile. But Yosef could have been in the dungeons, and he could have been a servant and a slave, but he was a viceroy. And this is the koach that we have, that even in the Golus, and we're very much in a dark Golus now, extremely dark Golus, is that we have the abilities to have atzlacha, also begashmis. And the Rebbe blessed people with ashiras. And the Jewish people now are in a way of, in Bechlolis in general. Obviously, a lot of individuals are suffering, and we all feel our own and each other's pains of the needs that are there. But in general, it's on a level on the bigger picture. There's a lot of success and opportunities today in this world, and that's very similar to the life of Yosef. So I just want to say that when it comes to Shabbat this week, we find a lot of things. We find that the Parsha, we find something very interesting, that also the seeds of Geula, the seeds of redemption, starting this week. That the Yehuda, who's been demoted by his brothers, and goes off in last week's Parsha and lives, so to say, alone, and has the whole incident with Tamar, and gives birth to Peretz, which is going to be eventually the grandfather of King David, which is the grandfather of Mashiach. And he's demoted. Yehuda is demoted. The concept of Yehuda, which represents royalty by the Jewish people, that was demoted. And when do we see Yehuda start to come back into form? Is in this week's Parsha, towards the end of this week's Parsha, when Yehuda comes to take responsibility first for his family, and then for Binyamin specifically. And the final showdown is in next week's Parsha, Vayigash. So again, these are the small little things that maybe will go unnoticed in this week's Parsha. While it was happening, it didn't seem maybe so special. But this is really the beginning of Geula. because Vayigash is Yehuda, which is Yosef and Yehuda. They represent two superpowers within the Jewish people. And like the Haftarah says, the Va'avdi David Nasi that David is going to be the king of all the Jewish people. And we find, so what do we find interesting? We find is, in two incidences we find where Yehuda starts to take responsibility. We see why he's the leader. One is we find that Yehuda, that the brothers come back. We don't have any mention of Yehuda. The brothers go down, the father sends them down to Egypt to go buy food. I mean, it seemed like a simple task. Everyone was doing it, everyone's doing it. Everyone was doing it. Everyone went down to Egypt. He came with money, and he came back with food. That seemed simple enough. Not only that, he could have sent one person. But, there's a large family to feed, so he sends all 10 sons. He doesn't send Binyamin. And they're okay with the mission because they knew Yosef is buried and is sold to Egypt, and they're going to try to get him out, right? We have to take out the hostages. So we have to take the last one out. We have to take Yehuda out, Yosef out. So they come down to Egypt, and it seemed like a simple, in and out story. Buy the food and come back home. Maybe check around the markets to see if they heard anyone schmoozing about the Hebrew slave. And the next thing they know, they're imprisoned, accused of spying, conspiracy theories, right? I know better than you. You guys are spies. No, don't tell me differently. Right? All the conspiracy theories against the Jews started then. And then Shimon is taken captive, and they don't understand what's happening. The sons of Yaakov are trying to figure out what's going on over here. And again, we don't find anything special about Yehuda. They come back home, and they tell their father the story. They have the food, but they tell the father, we have good news and bad news. The good news is we have food. The bad news is we're shy one person. He became, Shimon's not here either. He was stuck because the person kept him. Yosef, the crazy king, viceroy of Egypt, has accused us of spies and kept Shimon. And Binyamin has to come back down if we want Shimon to come. And again, Reuven tries to position himself as the elder brother to take responsibility, seemingly like he did in last week's Parsha. And again, what's interesting is, in both last week and this week's Parsha, Reuven tries something, and Yehuda does something. Right? Last week, Reuven says, throw him in the pit because he had a plan to take him out. His plan didn't work. And this week's Parsha, again, Reuven tries to tell his father that he guarantees Binyamin's return with the life of his two sons. Rashi says, my older son's a fool. What kind of agreement is that? What kind of guarantee that you're my child for my grandchild? It's like a collateral with one child against the next. But then Yehuda comes down. And finally Yehuda realizes, okay, he needs to step up. He has a responsibility here. Because it's not happening. We're hungry. Yaakov's irritated. And yet Yehuda comes in, he doesn't give his life. He says, Chatasi, I'll sin to you. I take full responsibility. If it's in this world, in the next world, I sin I'm gonna owe you if I don't get the job done. And he goes down to Egypt, and when Binyamin is taken, it's his responsibility. He takes responsibility himself. He doesn't leverage with other people's lives. He takes responsibility with himself to make sure that he gets the job done. And next week's Parsha, he steps up the fight with Yosef to make sure that he brings Binyamin back. And this is where we see again, it's not just that Yehuda, we see his ability to be the leader of his brothers. What we see deeper than over here is we see the seeds of Geula, of redemption. We see the Jewish hope of our future is seen in Yehuda's small little actions that he takes this week on behalf of the Jewish people, on behalf of the future of the Jewish people. The Jewish people's future were dependent on Yehuda. Yehuda had to bring food, and he had to bring Binyamin home there and back. And he sacrifices himself for that. And from there on, the tribe of Yehuda is the tribe of leadership. From Yehuda becomes the family of royalty, of kingdom, of David, Mashiach. So again, there's a lot of small things that are happening sometimes in our lives. And I think that's the or that we go with, the small candle that we take from the month of Kislev and from the holiday of Chanukah is sometimes we want to see the answer right away. And sometimes we want to understand everything right away. And sometimes we want to see the shifts right away. There was a lot of shifting in this week's Parsha. The Miketz is the idea that something ended and something new began. There's 7 years until they start to realize that what happened from Yosef becoming viceroy. Something happened. Yehuda started to take leadership. It took hundreds of years for that to play out in King David, and thousands of years for that to finalize with Mashiach. But we have to always know that with a small light, there's something, when you're holding a light, something positive, when you have the positivity with you, you're not going to always see the results immediately, but eventually you're going to see how the redemption of yourself, your family, and the Jewish people can start with the smallest shifts, the smallest decisions you make, the smallest mindset, the mindset of redemption versus the mindset of enslavement, the mindset of geula over the mindset of galus. The Rebbe says it's an aleph, it's one letter. It changes the difference between geula and goyala and galus. So I want to say l'chaim to us. Again, we take out 3 Sifrei Torah this week, and Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, and Chanukah, and it's Miketz, to put an end to the galus, an end to the suffering, an end to enough lives have been spilled. I heard again the Schlinger families. Chaim is a very close family friend of my wife and my wife's family. I know them through my wife Leila. I went to go meet the parents right after, to sit and daven with them right after the passing of their son, and the horrific. I mean, this so horrible. But just talking about a hero. I don't know if I didn't see it published. I don't read all the news, but my wife spoke to Rabbi Schlenger's sister, who was there, who lives in Sydney, Rabbi Castell, his wife, Tzipora, who's also shluchim in Sydney, and they were very close, of course, to the brother Rabbi Eli. That he could have protected himself. The reason he was shot down is because he protected others. When the insane shooting for 20 minutes, that no one thought, the police didn't come in, literally for 20 minutes shooting with shotguns. I mean, it wasn't like they had a team of people, 2 people with shotguns. For 20 minutes just shooting out Jews like they're hunting animals. And he walked over to the shooter with his hands up and begged him to stop. And he was shot in cold blood right in his face. So right facing the killer, the murderer. This is small things. This is the small. There's no beauty in the end of the story, but to be here, this is a level of responsibility. Someone who looked to something positive versus negative. He even had faith in the killer. The killer maybe would find compassion and stop killing, stop murdering. So I just want to say, Mir Hashem Yimkam Damam, God should avenge their blood, and this should be the final blood that the Jewish people have to do before the Mashiach, have to spill before the Mashiach comes, and we should know only good things and good tidings and B'suras Tovos, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu B'meher Mamish. Good Shabbos, everyone. I'm not sure, is that 773 Matthew? I'm not sure the 206773 is, but I'm sure there's a Kiddush this week in University District Minyan. Yes. In the Shabbos Chanukah, Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. Please come join, support the Minyan. And I don't know if there's 3 Sefer Torahs there, but I'm sure they're going to have 3 readings of Mitzvah Hashem if they could get a Minyan. And we only have B'suras Tovos, good things. Remember, this is a month of light, the holiday of light, the holiday of strength. And the Kates comes in different ways, in different forms. And we should be a Miketz, the end of anything positive for the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Good Shabbos, everyone, and good Yom Tov. Take care.
Shabbos, good Yom Tov. All right.